Welcome back at Seymour Mac, and today I'm going to be testing out the Ritz Gear 256GB V90 cards. For a videographer, one of the most important tools that you can have is the right memory card for the job. And when you're filming weddings, which are typically 10 to 12 hour days, or long form content, like I have a conference coming up, it's going to be about 6 to 8 hours worth of speeches, I don't want to have to worry about running out of memory card space. What I really want to know is how much runtime can I get out of these when I put them into the FX3. Now, the way I have the FX3 rigged out with a large V-mount battery from ZG-Cine, I don't really have to worry about running out of power, and that's great, but I certainly don't want to have to worry about running out of memory card space. Now, I went with these, even though I've never used Ritz Gear before, I typically stick with SanDisk, because for these two, I paid about $370, but for one SanDisk, you're gonna spend about $250, $260. So I thought I'd be able to get the most bang for my buck if I got these. And you could see in one of the reviews here, somebody went and tested out the runtimes compared to those SanDisks, and they run basically about the same rate. So big shout out to this guy here for leaving that comment and running the test, because it is a big part of why I committed to going with these Ritz Gears on top of the good reviews that it had. Now, Ritz Gear probably isn't the most top-end card that you can use. You could try something like Angel Birds, which you can get about a 512GB V90 card for about $600 though. And you can also get a CF Express A card, a 1TB card for about $500. That'll work well in the Sony lineups, but I didn't really want to have to spend that much money considering I knew I was going to have to buy multiple. So let's take a quick look on the run times that we're going to be able to get out of this when we put them into the FX3. So after putting the memory card into the FX3 and formatting it and running through the different settings, different frame rates and different resolutions, we tested out 4K and we even looked at 1080 to see what our maximum run times were going to be. This is what we came up with. For 4K 10-bit 422, which is typically how I will film everything if possible, at 24 frames per second, we wound up with 5 hours and 18 minutes. At 30 frames per second, we got 3 hours and 49 minutes. At 60 frames per second, we got 2 hours and 39 minutes. And at 120 frames per second, we got 2 hours and 32 minutes. So I even looked at what it would be if it was 4K 8-bit at the lowest file size settings. When you go through the different frame rates, you're gonna notice 24 frames, 30, 60, 120, they all have different file sizes. So when you run through the different frame rates, you're gonna notice that you have different options for your 8-bit. So I just went with the lowest 8-bit settings, and I wanted to kind of compare to see what our maximum run times were gonna be, and they are pretty substantial. So for 4K 8-bit at its lowest file size setting, at 24 frames per second, we got 8 hours and 32 minutes, which should basically be more than what you need for almost anything. For 30 frames per second, we got 8 hours and 25 minutes, almost right up there with it. 60 frames per second, we got 3 hours and 28 minutes. And at 120 frames per second, we got 2 hours and 32 minutes. Now, I wanted to also look at 1080 HD at 10-bit 422 to see what it would be compared to our 4K 10-bit 422, considering that I'm gonna have about 6 hours worth of speeches or more for an upcoming event. 24 frames per second, 5 hours and 18-minute runtime just might not be enough. So we may wind up actually filming this in either 4K 8-bit, which is probably what I'll do, or maybe even 1080 10-bit, because they really don't need 4K files. They're not really going to utilize it. I will typically film everything in 4K though, even if I know I'm going to export it in 1080, because I want the ability to be able to punch in, give me a little more options there. So for 1080 HD 10-bit 422 at 24 frames per second, we got 10 hours and 4 minutes. At 30 frames per second, we got 9 hours and 54 minutes. At 60 frames per second, we got 9 hours and 9 minutes. And at 120 frames per second, we got 6 hours and 57 minutes. So that would be more than what I need. And even at 4K 8-bit, it would be more than what I need for an upcoming event. So are these cards going to work out well? That remains to be seen. Let's see how they perform under long run times. Hopefully I don't find any issues. And with the Sony series, the FX3, and even with the A7 IV, which is what I'm filming this on here, you have dual memory card slots. So I would highly suggest running both simultaneously, although you do have to be aware it is going to decrease your battery runtime. So you may have to swap out your batteries more often if you are running those cards simultaneous. But at least then you know and you have the reassurance that if something goes wrong with one of the memory cards, you are recording to both of those slots and you have a backup right away. So I hope this information was helpful for you if you are looking for this specific type of information. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below and I'll see you in the next video.